Morning, everybody. It would have been a great pleasure to participate in this symposium in person. This conference, indeed, is certainly one of the most important semiotic events of the year, together with the World Congress in Thessaloniki. Well, we'll all convene together at the end of August to the beginning of September 2022. But unfortunately, um, I am at the moment a visiting professor at the University of Buenos Aires, and specifically, I am now in Sao Paulo, Brazil, to give a couple of seminars at the University of Sao Paulo. So it would have been impossible for me to go back and forth for the symposium, but I'm very happy that a wonderful group of scholars coming from the University of Turin and belonging to the research group Facets that I have the honor and the privilege to direct as a principal investigator. A project that is financed by the European Research Council is there in Tallinn to communicate the important results that all these young scholars are achieving in their research projects within the framework of Facets. The key words of my presentation are quite simple. One is semiotics, the second one is Lotman, the third one is space. These are the three main points, the three main elements of my talk. I decided not to propose any PowerPoint because I know that following this talk will be already quite boring, given that researchers are there and I'm in a digital space removed and far away in space and time. So I didn't want to add a further level of a remoteness by hiding my face behind a PowerPoint. Given the presentation conditions in which I am, which reminds me of a Derrida's postal card, a video message that I must send to you, but without any possibility to control it, because such is the organization of the symposium. Because I'm intervening online within a symposium that is in presence, but I cannot actually interact with the rest of the participants. Given this condition, I will be very simple. Basically, I have 2 points that I want to raise. The first is hopefully, I would say, contingent, and the second one is substantial. The first contingent point concerns Lotman, the face, and the semisphere in the particular epoch in which we are living. Fortunately, the pandemic is binding off and binding away in many countries of the world, but we have gone through 2 quite difficult years, which at the same time were extremely interesting from the semiotic point of view, because we can say that the pandemic has represented what Lotman would have called an explosive event. This explosive event has suddenly changed the structural configuration of many semiotic elements and constellations and patterns in the semisphere, I would say in the global semisphere. And some changes and trends that were already in place in many areas of the semisphere and have been already in place for a certain amount of time were suddenly accelerated. So I wouldn't say that we have experienced something new in the pandemic, but we have experienced an enormous acceleration of the new that is tantamount to an explosion. This is what an explosion does, accelerating events in time and bringing about the consequences and results of this acceleration. This explosive event, I would say, has concerned especially the face. There were many dramatic changes in the semi-sphere as a consequence of the pandemic. Certainly, there was an increase in digitalization. Certainly, all the activities that involved a non-digital sense of reality or a sense of reality that cannot be digitalized were hampered, and as a consequence, had to find other ways to manifest themselves or to carry on. But I think there was no element in human society that was so affected by the pandemic, that was so much at the center of this explosive configuration as the face. The face was massively digitalized. I'm continuing this trend by digitalizing my face for you. The face was concealed behind a relatively unknown and unusual device, at least in the West or in other parts of the world, which is the face cover or mask, or call it as you want. The face was removed from the usual settings of social interface interaction, where it would be massively present beforehand. So the face is the element of this explosion. It is a social, cultural, but also a biological element that was deeply reconfigured by the pandemic. And now we are about to enter a new phase in which this explosion is progressing and evolving towards new crystallizations, new structures. So the question to ask is, how will the face be in the semispheres of the future? Will it have the same centrality, the same semiotic centrality that we had and has had so far? Or there will be new ways to communicate. There will be a new way to signify one's intentions, one's emotions, one's projects through the face, which is exactly what we do as human beings. So, if as researchers, we'll explore some trends that have followed this explosive event, and they will do so according to their skills, competencies, and specific field of inquiry. As far as I'm concerned, let me just give you some observation, some consideration. Let me propose some insights from the point of view of a general semantic theory. My contention is that the way in which human beings and human groups use the face in order to communicate will actually change. Not only as a consequence of the new habit of wearing a mask, especially in settings in which one is surrounded by many unknown people in a closed environment, playing, for example, but also because the digitalization of the face and the massive and incredible advances in the capacity to transform the interface communication into a digital communication have bringing about new ways to manipulate the face in every social setting, in its digital representations, in its digital presentations. So the face has been in many cultures and in many societies the pillar of mutual trust. I see your face and I trust you. I don't like your face and I don't trust you. Of course, there were techniques throughout the centuries. We are studying physiognomy in particular this year within the project Facets that would try to investigate the meaning of the face, the hidden intentions behind the face, even the future of a person or the personality, depending on the face he or she had. But anyway, there was the idea that the face would be a reliable signifier. So it could convey lies, it could convey truths, but at the same time, it was something to deal with. It was a little bit like writing. Writing can be used to lie. So it's an element for semiotics, as Umberto Eco would have proposed. But nevertheless, it's something that is considered as an embodiment of social interaction. We use writing in order to communicate with each other. We use faces in order to communicate with each other. Are we going toward a situation in which the digital image of the face will be so present and will be so easy to manipulate that we'll actually remove the face from the elements that we consider as reliable in interpersonal communication? Are we going to consider the face only in certain particular settings and remove it from other settings in which it will be present in the past? In a job interview, for instance, are we going to still to look into the interviewee or interviewer face in order to guess what is behind the appearance? Or in the case in which this setting is completely digitalized, we're going to actually lose our face, not as individuals, but as societies. We're going to actually live more and more in a society in which interactions do not trust the digital face. This is the first element that I want to propose to your attention and discussion. The second element is that when we have thought with Lotman about the semisphere as a pattern of patterns, as a hierarchy of hierarchies, as a topology of typologies that is able to grasp or at least to model the circulation of meaning within a society or even an interaction between societies. We've always thought that at the core, at the kernel of this hemisphere, as well as in the irradiations of this kernel up to the frontiers of the hemisphere and the thresholds that separate its inside from its outside, the word text, the word configuration of text. Lotman, of course, has written a lot about text, has worked a lot with text, but has worked also with the body. The body is also a text from the semiotic point of view. Now, my contention is that we should more and more think of the semisphere not only as a conglomeration of text, but also as a conglomeration of textualized or semioticized bodies. Our faces are actually important elements of the semisphere. Not only the representation of our faces, but our faces as biological substrata that are inflected by culture and by discourses and textualities so far that they are turned themselves, our faces, our biological faces, this face of mine, into an element of the semisphere. Now, my contention is that after this explosive event of the pandemic, our faces have changed their place in the semisphere. They used to be an element at the center of many semispheres. They used to regulate as a pivotal element so many interactions and also semiotic and textual configurations within semispheres. My contention is that after the pandemic and as a consequence of the massive and impressive acceleration of semiotic dynamics that this pandemic has entailed, our face has been pushed towards a different place in semisphere, which is its thresholds and its frontiers. Now, in the past, before the pandemic, before these massive accelerations, there would be already faces at the thresholds of the semispheres. There would be faces of minorities, faces that would not abide by the facial standards of a certain society, faces that would not fulfill the requirements of the facial normativity Deleuze and Guattari have so deeply written about. But now everybody's face is going toward that threshold in which the other is becoming an object, an element of the scrutiny in a way that it was not usually viable, not usually present before. Um, our faces have become elements of potential danger. They have become screens on which everyone is continuously checking the possibility that the other individual becomes, by his or her own facial appearance, a potential risk. But our faces are becoming also elements of a new dynamic of translation, a porous uh, feature, an element in that membrane, in that filter that is between the inside of the hemisphere and is outside. Through our faces, we are constructing little by little digital appearance, by digital appearance, social network post after social network post, the continuously tingling and changing membranes and porous frontiers that separate a semisphere from another semisphere. You see, in the pre-digital environment, the semisphere would be structured around some culture text, some central textual deposits of semiotic interaction or creation, literary text, for instance, or religious text, that would constitute the kernel of semisphere. With the increased digitalization of our interactions, I would suggest that on the one hand, the face will become less and less, meaning that we'll trust the other's face in digital interactions in a very suspicious way. On the other hand, the face will become more and more. The biological face will be a treasure to protect, to treasure, to hide as well, and to conceal from possible exploitment by the digital world. So, on the one hand, we won't trust the digital face, it will be less and less trustable. On the other hand, our biological face will become a real treasure to protect in order to protect our identity, in order to protect our place in society, in order to protect our interactions. It is exactly within this range, this space that becomes less and less trustable at the digital level, and the face that becomes more and more important in its biological, physical, material ontology that our semiotic reflection as a group in Facets is currently developing. And you can have just a sample of it through the wonderful talks that the other researchers will present today. Thank you very much. Really sorry for my absence, and I'll try to follow the conference anyway. And hopefully I'll go back to Tartu soon. I remember when I was in Tartu like 20 years ago, exactly 20 years ago. And it was one of the most memorable experiences of my youth as a researcher. So thanks to all the friends and colleagues in Tartu for this wonderful congress and the mighty organization in very difficult times. Thank you. Bye bye.